Since it's 1 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for coming for the second of our lecture artist mini talk in the series about the exhibition Amend. And today we have Ashley, one of our artists, who's going to talk to us. Ashley, and give us a talk about her work, and then at the end we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, think them up, and we'll have a chance for you to go ahead and ask at the end of the session. Until then, please go ahead and keep your cameras off and your microphones off, so that way we can make sure we hear Ashley as she's speaking. And then just real quick before we go ahead and let her take over, I have a quick announcement from Becky Ocampo from the Arts Pathway. So Becky says here that courtesy of the Arts Pathway, there will be a raffle for 1 card account credits. With your 1 card, you can purchase items from the bookstore, the CCBC cafes, printing, and most campus vending machines. The drawings will be held after the conclusion of the artist talks, the entire series. So not at the end of today's session, but after we're all done. And winners will be notified by email. So just a reminder too, that registration is now open for winter and spring semester. So please meet with an advisor and register, and make sure that you know your pathway. So with that aside, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with y'all today, and an honor to show work with these other fabulous Native artists for Amend. Thank you to the curators and the funders and CCBC generally for this opportunity. And hello, students. I imagine there are a lot of students in the crowd today. My name's Ashley Minner. I'm a community-based visual artist and a professor. Also, sometimes I teach at MICA in the Community Arts Graduate Program, and regularly I am a professor of the practice in the Department of American Studies at UMBC, where I also direct the minor in Public Humanities. I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. I grew up right here in Baltimore County in Dundalk, which is where I still live and work. I'm coming to you today from my studio in Dundalk. If you're curious about my educational background, I got my undergraduate degree in General Fine Arts from MICA, which is Maryland Institute College of Art, right here in Baltimore. Then I went back for my Master's of Arts in Community Art, and then they expanded the program to include the terminal degree in our field, which is MFA, Master of Fine Arts, and I went back and got that. And then most recently, I finished my PhD in American Studies from University of Maryland, College Park, and I went back to school again, because I was being asked to speak and write so frequently about my experience as an American Indian person in Baltimore and about my artwork, which is based on in my identity. I think all of my work is, that I felt like I needed another credential to be able to talk about that stuff with a kind of another kind of authority. So it's been a long process, and my work has evolved, and my practice has become more expansive. And I'm going to speak to you specifically about the work that's in Amend, but a little bit more about what I do now, because that work's now 10 years old. So let me show you some pictures. Let's see. So I'm coming to you today, like I said, from Baltimore County, Maryland, which is the part of the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway people and the Susquehannock people and some other folks. A good first stop, if you're curious about whose land you occupy, would be this website, Native Land CA because it's out of Canada. And I say first stop because it's not comprehensive. It doesn't list everybody that's ever inhabited a place, and it's evolving. It's online, it's malleable. People are always submitting new content, and basically the entire state of Maryland says Piscataway, but and the Piscataway folks are still here. That's true. They were here 12,000 years before John Smith ever sailed up the Chesapeake, which was in the early 1600s and well before the formation of the United States. But it was actually the Susquehannock people who ceded the land that would become Maryland to the colony also in the 1600s. And other folks have always been passing through this area, and they still do. And some choose to stay, like my people. Today in the Baltimore area, the most populous single group of indigenous folks are members of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. And we are not indigenous to here. We are descendants of folks who settled between the James River, which is in what is now called Virginia, and the Great Pedee River, which is in what is now called South Carolina. We coalesced in what is today known as Robeson County, North Carolina, because we were fleeing colonial warfare and disease, and we formed a cohesive community also long before the founding of the United States of America there. We take our name from the Lumbee River, which winds its way through our tribal territory. This is what it looks like. You can see it's swampy. Sometimes it's referred to as Drowning Creek. And what doesn't look like the river in the swamp looks a lot like this. This is a tobacco field. It's a very rural area. And in the 20th century, many Lumbee families found themselves sharecropping tobacco, cotton, cash crops on their tribal homeland, meaning they lost ownership of their homeland and then they were farming for other folks. And it was a very difficult way to survive. Most people who experience this refer to it as a modern day form of slavery. Basically, you work real hard all year and hope for a return at the end of the season, which many times you do well to break even. And this was the lifestyle that my mom was born into. This is a picture of my grandmom and my uncles and my mom when they were children in Robeson County, North Carolina. So this is right after World War II. My mom was born in 1948, and many Lumbee folks in this era, they found out that it was easier to make a living in bigger cities where you could get a job working in a factory and have access to a better quality of life and more opportunities. So what did they do? They migrated north to places like Baltimore and Philly and Detroit. And it so happens that most of them went to Baltimore. And today we have the largest satellite community of Lumbee tribal members outside of North Carolina. And here you can see where Robeson County is in the very southernmost part of the state. And they left the river and the swamp and the fields to come to a place that looks like this. This is an image by A. Aubrey Bodine. And because Baltimore is so neighborhood specific, let's get on the right side of town. This is a shot from East Baltimore in Patterson Park. And this is the general area where they settled, in a corridor along South Broadway and East Baltimore Street. Just to the left of Patterson Park, as you see here on this Google map. And the bulk of migration took place beginning in the 1940s. Here's some Lumbee women standing on South Broadway in the 1940s through the 1960s. And the first thing Lumbee folks did when they got to Baltimore was form churches. Many people are surprised to learn that Lumbees are pervasively Southern Baptist. And one of the ways they found to feel safe in an environment that didn't understand them, and in that time and today, you had to be either Black or white in Baltimore almost. There was no option to be American Indian. And I'll get into more about how that played out in everyday life, but they made churches so they could continue to worship in their cultural way. Eventually, the oldest church formed by Lumbee Indians in Baltimore City ended up at this building at 211 South Broadway, and it's still open and active today, the South Broadway Baptist Church, which has been right there since 1978. I was born in 1983, so I spent a lot of time growing up here. And you can see some Lumbee folks worshiping and singing the way they do. This is Sister Dosha on the left and Brother Howell on the right. And here, which is the Baltimore American Indian Center at 113 South Broadway, just a block north, and that's still open and active. And you can see me here some years ago working with young people, which is what I did, well, I guess what I still do, just in a different way, for most of my adult life. So the story of the series that's included in this exhibition begins at the church. And it begins in Sunday school class with my teacher. This is Sister Linda Cox. And the way church is organized in our community, you go to Sunday school. Sunday school is comprised of people around your same age. And this was when I was around 30 years old, getting up to close to 30 years old, in a room full of people around the same age that I had grown up around my entire life. And to begin class, Sister Linda always has us hold hands in a circle, and we go around the circle and we each say something that we're thankful for. And so most people usually say something like, I thank the Lord for this day, or I thank the Lord for waking me up this morning, or I thank the Lord for bringing me in here today. And sometimes I used to get frustrated thinking, oh, wow, why don't people think of something more original to say? You know, you just said what the last person said. But on this particular day, I listened as people went around the circle and they said, I thank the Lord for bringing me here today. I thank the Lord for waking me up this morning. And I thought, wow, you know, it really is miraculous that God continues to wake us up and bring us together. Because around the circle, looking at my peers, we had folks from every walk of life, folks who were professional lawyers and folks who are professional drug dealers, artists, teachers, construction workers, metal workers. So there's that, and then there's the fact that many of us have had very hard lives and survived already almost insurmountable odds, and yet God sees fit to wake us up and bring us together every Sunday morning to this circle, and we're still holding space together. And I thought, wow, I've done so much work with younger people in my community, and then I had just finished up this whole series of work with elders in my community, and I thought it would be a good idea to do something with people my own age. And so I collaborated with my good friend, photographer Sean Scheidt, and about 30 people from my generation, when we were all about 30, to create the Exquisite Lumbee series. And folks would visit the photography studio in groups, in small groups, maybe 1 or 2 at a time, 4 or 5 at most. I asked them to wear whatever they felt best in. I didn't give them too much coaching. The text you see in the background is taken from surveys that I gave them, which were meant to elicit positive thoughts about their lives, with questions like, what are you most proud of? What's the best thing you ever did in life? What does it mean to you to be Lumbee and from Baltimore? The people that were there at the same time would encourage one another from back of the camera. They'd be like, oh, you look so good. Now do this. Now do that. You're killing it. And you can see that our style really starts to emerge. We are we come from blended ancestors, as I mentioned. We run the full gamut of skin colors, hair textures, eye colors. We defy stereotypes about what American Indians should look like, which, by the way, were fabricated by the Hollywood industry. And that's part of the reason why people just don't understand when we say we're American Indian on the streets of Baltimore. They have no point of reference that looks like us. Yet we do have a look that's common among us, and we recognize each other. And I think we're really nice looking people. Keith here was the only person who participated in the project who chose to wear traditional regalia. And later other folks saw Keith's portrait and they were like, oh, can I redo mine? But, you know, Keith actually has a government job. He manages the Commission on Ethnic Affairs, or the Office of Ethnic commissions for the governor's office of community initiatives right now, and he most days goes to work in a suit. So for him, he oftentimes makes a point about the clothes don't make the man. Like, he doesn't have to wear this regalia to be an American Indian person. He's just as much who he is in a suit. Here's Margaret, and you can just see the diversity in how we look, and the attitude and the humor in how we look. And I knew this project was a success when we were doing it because everybody wanted their portrait to be their Facebook portrait for a while. And then after we had the opening, which you're about to see some pictures of, everybody wanted a picture with their picture, and then that was their Facebook picture. And the name, the Exquisite Lumbee Projects, comes from an Exquisite Corpse book that I made, and it comes from the Exquisite Corpse game that the Surrealists used to play. This was at parties. They would fold over a piece of paper and pass it around. The first person would draw on the paper, fold it over, pass it to the next person, they would draw. And nobody knew what they were going to end up with until the end, when you open the paper and you have this wonderful composite drawing. And so I thought it would be cool to make an Exquisite Corpse book with our headshots, which I slid along our facial features. And then you could actually play with the facial features and scramble our faces. And in the end, you end up with, you know, another good looking Lumbee. Here are shots of the original opening, which was at the Light Gallery on Charles Street. And as I said, people were really excited to take pictures with their portraits, and then that became their social media presence. The portraits eventually made their way back to our tribal college in Pembroke, North Carolina, which is where these original prints are hanging today. As a matter of fact, I made 2 sets. One went to the person in the picture. Everybody got their own portrait, and another went to the gallery. And sometimes famous people will take pictures with them, and then I'll see it later. Here's a couple of the guys from the 1491s. Here's some Lumbee royalty posing with the portraits. And then eventually, some years ago, Nancy Palm, an art historian, decided she wanted to write an article about this work for First American Art magazine. And it started to have a second life. All of a sudden it was in high demand again. Everybody wanted to show it everywhere. So this work has been reproduced at much larger scale. It's been in Chicago, all over North Carolina, all over Maryland and Virginia and beyond. It just won't quit. I think this is the body of work for which I'm most well known today. And if you would like to read more about my artistic practice and as it's evolved, here's an article that came out about me and Be More Art in 2019. And most recently, I did an artist talk for the Walters on October 13th. You can find it on YouTube or Facebook. And then my research as a scholar, which is, I'm still figuring out what the intersection is with my artistic practice, but I think of myself as having a general practice that's really expansive, and it can hold all of these things. So I've been doing archival research to map other places in that neighborhood where the church and the Indian Center is, which used to be known as Baltimore's reservation back when thousands of Indians still lived there. And there's been a number of articles about that good work that I'm doing now in collaboration with my elders again. This one was about repatriating the archives. That means when you find something in the archives that belongs to a cultural community, you return it. The Smithsonian picked up on the work that I'm doing. So here you can see Keith from the portrait series on the far right in another regalia, and Miss Celeste Swan, who is Powhatan, in the middle. Lewis Campbell, who's Lumbee, on the left, who was also on the Exquisite Lumbee project, but you didn't get to see his portrait. Here standing on Broadway. This is Smithsonian Folklife magazine. and another article in the conversation where I talked about just my process for archival research and what I was hoping to do. So presently, I'm collecting all of this documentation in my community, and I'm debating whether or not to include the portraits from the Exquisite Lumbee project in a new archive that's going to be housed at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, that the public can access, especially our community can access, to have a way to get to our history, to preserve the moments since we got here until now, because we're important too, and we're responsible for helping to make Baltimore what it is today. So I think people should know we exist and we're exquisite. And if you all would like to learn even more about me, here's a link to my website, or rather my web address, and my handle if you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm much more active on Instagram. I'm still learning how to Twitter. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Thank you.
Ashley, I was wondering if you could talk about your talk about the community arts program at MICA. Probably a lot of our students don't know about that program, and also, yeah, I'll start with that, about the community arts program and how that influenced your work and the kind of things that you do in that program.
Sure. Wow, I could give you the long version or maybe a short version. Let's see. Okay, y'all. So I'm from Dundalk, as I mentioned, and I went to MICA, which to me in the early 2000s seemed like a very fancy place. My high school was Patapsco High School and Center for the Arts. I was in the visual arts magnet, so I had a little bit of exposure to studio art and you know, what might be expected of me. But MICA was just a whole nother level, right? So I got there and it was rough. Thankfully, my best friend from high school went with me, so we were like, you know, each other's shadow. We were in all the same classes and all of that. Eventually, I came across a course called Visual Journalism, and I read in the description that we would be visiting different Baltimore neighborhoods and just spending weeks at a time. And I was like, yes, like I am gonna go eat some food and hang out and be in a place that's familiar to me and just pass the time and get credit for it. So I thought I was getting away with something, but what I found out was all the things I was really longing to do that I would be doing anyway are actually part of community art. Spending time with people and learning to respond artistically to those relationships. So the teacher of that class, Ken Kraftcheck, later developed the Master in Community Arts program, which I told you expanded to the MFA in Community Arts program. And in this program, you are first assigned to a nonprofit organization in Baltimore. Used to be just in the 17th district. Now you can go pretty much all over the city. And matter of fact, I only did it because Ken said that I could go work with the Indian education program of Baltimore City Public Schools. But you will necessarily be exposed to folks outside of your comfort zone. You don't just get to pick and choose to begin with. Then you go through a matching process where they choose you, you choose them, and you are mainly focused on youth programming or whatever it is they do at that site for the first year. Then the second year is more about your own studio practice and producing a new body of work. It's a wonderful program. If anybody has more questions about it, I'm happy to email with you or meet individually or refer you to folks who could tell you even more. But I think if you have a mind to do artwork for social justice and you want to stay local and make a difference here in Baltimore, that's a fine place for you to apply your talents.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. So I do have it now that you can unmute yourselves. Figured that out. Thank you for the time. So there was a question here from Rakisha. If you want to go ahead and ask it, please feel free. Oh, okay. Well,
I can read it.
oh, okay.
Rakisha said, throughout the presentation, I heard you refer to yourself as American Indian. Is that a proper term for others outside of your community to use? By the way, wonderful presentation. So glad I could make it. You rock, Ashley. Thank you, Rakisha. So that's a great question. Yes, I think you can use American Indian to talk about folks indigenous to the United States. It's a problematic term, like most of the ones we have to work with, because it's a misnomer. That means it's actually like an incorrect name, same as Native American. And if this was my class, we could have a whole discussion about why neither one is adequate. But American Indian, obviously the Indian comes from Columbus's voyage where he thought he was going to India, and we're still living with the fallout, you know, over 500 years later. Native American, in theory, could refer to anybody who was born in the Americas. And then, by the way, the word America, like the United States sort of appropriated that from the rest of the Western Hemisphere. We're all Americans. These are the Americas. So I think if you are respectful in your intent, when you use one of these terms, it's fine because they're widely acceptable. Amongst ourselves, we call each other Indians. I wouldn't advise that necessarily. And then also, the most correct thing you could do would be refer somebody by the name of their tribal nation. So if you happen to know, it would be better to call me Lumbee, to call Anna Sularakis Dine, to call Monique Verdun Homa. You'll meet her in a couple days. So, and on. But you don't always know. So the best thing is to just approach folks with respect.
We have another question on the chat. Ashley, what are some common stereotypes that people have about American Indians, and how are you perceived in your community growing up?
Ooh, okay. So we live in a settler colonial society. This means that there is an invasive settler society on this land that has no intention of ever leaving. And in this formation of colonialism, the indigenous people are either outright killed or disappeared. So at different points during history, the policy of the United States government towards indigenous people on this land has indeed been genocide, as in they just want to kill us. And some people would argue that that's still the case. But the fact is, we weren't all killed, which is a common misconception. You all know there are people in the world who actually believe American Indians are extinct. It's not true. So then, because we weren't all killed, the policy becomes to disappear us. How does that happen? By creating stereotypes like what you see in Hollywood movies, which generally tends to be based on Indians of the Great Plains with the long black hair, ride horses, live in teepees, and even those are stereotypes. Or Pocahontas, the over-sexualized female Native woman. Also check out your Halloween costumes when people dress up as Indian. And by the way, Pocahontas was a child bride. She was a victim of rape. She never had a romantic relationship with John Smith. What else? Oh, by relegating us to the past, people only expect to see Indians in museums or wearing traditional garb. They don't expect that we live in brick houses, drive cars, work wherever we work. We don't have a contemporary personhood. So the way I was perceived growing up, most people assumed I was Latinx or Asian or mixed, which is true. My dad's white, my mom's Indian, and very seldom do people expect to run into an American Indian neighbor, coworker, etc. in Baltimore.
Thank you. Okay, so we have got a couple of questions here. Let's see, first one, I want to say you had a lovely presentation, and I'm just wondering where we can learn more about these subjects in Baltimore.
Sure, there's those articles that I shared that are easily Googleable. You could just Google my name probably and they'll pop up. There's also the Baltimore American Indian Center, which I mentioned. It's still open and active at 113 South Broadway. And unfortunately, we're in these pandemic times, so I think their hours are even more limited than usual, but I think Thursdays and Saturdays seem to be the days. They do maintain an active Facebook presence if you want to send a message to the Baltimore American Indian Center, and they're on Instagram. We also are fortunate enough to have the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian in our region, and that's just like a hop, skip, and a jump from Baltimore. Go down there and see a really world-class museum with interactive exhibits and live performances, and just even online, there's really great exhibits. I just sent my UMBC students to visit one called The Americans, curated by Paul Chet Smith the other day. Everything's online, so I would say use the internet to your benefit.
Okay, I'm going to try one more quick tech fix while I ask this next question. From Rachel, how has the pandemic affected your community work?
You know what? It hasn't too much. So my process lately has been convening my elders to help me map the community that was. And thankfully, we got 3 or 4 good meetings in before this all happened. But one real tragedy has been that the elders, they used to get together like once a week to eat and have a good time all day. The Indian Center sold the building where they used to meet, so they hadn't been doing that for a few years. And when I started this work, they had the opportunity to get back together, and it was very exciting, and everybody loved being in each other's company. They had just started to self-organize to meet again. Like the last thing I went to, they put together themselves and they invited me. And that was really exciting. And that was also in March, and we all know what happened in March, so they haven't been able to get together since. But I've been keeping up with them through mail and through the phone, and you know, thankfully able to access a lot of the information I need to from home, from my computer. So, you know, it hasn't held us up too much. I do really worry about the vulnerability of elderly people to, and all people to, COVID-19, and I hope everybody like takes appropriate precautions so this can be over sooner than later.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice message.
Thank you. I think we've got the unmute working now. So I just had it. Oh, shoot. I don't know why it keeps doing this. Okay, I'll do my best, Christine. So first off, the next question, let's see, was from, we still have one, and then we can go down to the people who typed in their names. So we have Lydia Richardson says, in your talk, you talked about the Southern Baptist Church, and I wonder how that translates. Is that the one you, no, how that translates or not to the American Indian festivals or cultural fest with a spiritual emphasis?
It's definitely present. I mean, the observant Lumbee folks are really observant. They incorporate their faith as Christians into every aspect of their lives. So it's quite common for events at the Baltimore American Indian Center or for powwows or any kind of meeting to open with an invocation, which is a prayer. And quite often they're
Your call has been forwarded to an
praying to Jesus.
Cut it out, Jiraiya.
So so what? So and there's some pushback. I mean, people ask, how can you take on the religion of your oppressor? And I feel like the preeminent Lumbee scholar Melinda Maynor Lowry had the best answer. She said, we just took it and made it our own. Like, if you go to a Lumbee Indian church, it's not like any other kind of church. We made the trappings of Christianity work for us. And you see this around the world in communities that have been colonized, where they're able to just take what they have and make it work for them, make it their own. So there's a lot of crossover. Let's see.
Looks like Gideon. Let me find. I have to scroll between like two screens here to find everybody.
I think that might have been all the questions so far.
Yeah, there's a couple people who just put their name in. Here we go. Here we go. Here you are. All right, I just unmuted. Excuse me if I say your name wrong. Mafat Gideon.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Ashley, for coming. Thank you for the presentation. So my question: do you think that your people are currently being like oppressed by the law?
By the law, yeah. Thank you, Mafat.
And how? If you don't
Sure.
mind.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you. Yeah, I think we suffer from racism, certainly, here in Baltimore and beyond. At home in Robeson County, Lumbee folks are the majority population, so it's a very different experience. Like, I can go to Robeson County and go to Walmart, and it's the weirdest, most comforting thing because I'm surrounded by people who look like me. Here, I'm kind of an anomaly. So people come up and ask silly things like, "What are you?" But let's see. So when you are what I would call racially ambiguous, when you're not easily classifiable, when people look at you and they can't tell what you are, I think you are subject to over-policing. It's just bothersome because race is so central to Americans' understanding of ourselves. And this goes all the way back to Columbus landing in the Americas, nowhere near here, in the Americas, and then the advent of chattel slavery of African folks and the way that race was invented and continues to be developed through time, which is like a whole complicated subject. But basically, just because of the way we look, yes, I feel like we're targeted. Also because of our intersectional identities, where we tend to live, the jobs we tend to do, the social classes we find ourselves in, which, by the way, are really wide ranging. Like I said, we're super diverse. We're not a monolith, but certain cross sections of our population are just like the parts that are often targeted by the state, by the police force, that are less likely to receive help in the event of an emergency. That, you know, yeah. We can make this American Studies class, though. That's like my wheelhouse now. That's a good question. That's a really good question.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mafat. I hope I answered it.
No.
No? No, that wasn't a good answer?
I mean, you kind of talked from your personal experience. Like, I was like kind of looking for like, if there's like actually like law that's like separates you from other people, that like keeps you at a disadvantage compared to other people.
I see. Okay, well, for one thing, the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina only has partial federal recognition, which means that the United States government agrees that we're American Indians, and we're like, thanks, we knew that. The other part of that would be that the government agrees by law that it has responsibility, a financial responsibility to our people, and many, over 500 tribes in the United States enjoy federal benefits through full federal recognition, and the Lumbee Tribe does not currently. So, and that's due to discrimination. I would say race-based discrimination and anti-Blackness. And then what else do we have? It was, we were subject to Jim Crow laws. If you all aren't familiar, that means in southern states, the laws where you see that segregation, race-based segregation was being enforced. White people had a fountain to drink out of, Black people had a fountain, white people could go inside and sit down and eat, Black people couldn't. Well, where Lumbees are from, there was triracial segregation. There was 3 sets of everything: white, Black, Indian. some of these were, these separations were enforced through law. Some were more just social understandings. Like when you went into the movie theater, for example, there were 3 sections and you just knew where you were supposed to sit based on your racial identity. Imagine trying to separate a bus into 3 sections with the Black people at the back, the Indians in the middle, and the white at the front. It's so ridiculous and confounding. Thankfully, we're beyond. Civil rights took place. We got some of our civil rights, but then we know that, you know, a lot of the same unjust policies have just transformed into things that are more slippery and difficult to point out, to say, yes, I'm being discriminated against and here's the proof.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next question, I'm unmuted, okay. Our next question comes from Rakisha. I think that was the next one line. Yes, and so that's Linnea. It's taking a second. Why are we not working? There we go.
Ashley, this is Rakisha again. I had already asked the 2 questions. So the one was about the church, and then the other one was about the American Indian Festival. So I just wanted to make sure that y'all knew that my name, screen name, it says Rakisha, but excuse me, Linnea, but it's actually Rakisha. But
Okay.
wonderful presentation, Ashley. Again, I'm so thankful I was able to make it and hear you speak. And as a fellow, again, community artist, I'm just so proud of what you're doing. And yeah, just keep doing your best.
Oh, thank you so much, Rakisha. Pleased to make your acquaintance, and thank you for the great questions, and receive all your praise. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, so Jess, would you have anything else you want to ask, or? Oh, wait, shoot.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to, it was the unmute kind of issue. I just want to thank you, Ashley, so much for giving this presentation. Was that working? I think I was talking and then it, okay, sorry. I don't know if you heard me, but I just want to thank you, Ashley, so much for your presentation and for being part of the exhibition. And yeah, I don't have any further questions, but I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, thank you all so much again. Again, it's an honor to be with you and to be represented in the exhibition. And thank you for paying some attention to American Indians at CCBC.
Well, thank you so much for the talk. And thank you, everyone who came. Thank you for the insightful questions. Ashley, thank you for the extremely educational and insightful guest lecture. We're so grateful to have you and have you in the exhibition. If anyone, I'm sure you said you wouldn't mind if people thought of things. We can always forward any questions you have to Ashley later. But on that note, once again, thank you, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Safe.